All right, guys. So we're going to continue on talking about. Today we're going to talk about adolescence, right? We're talking about human development, and so now we're moving into adolescence, and so I know I handed that worksheet out last week, and we went virtual a couple of days, and so instead of doing that lecture last week, I thought I would just do it today. All right, and so this worksheet isn't going to be due until a week from Tuesday.
Our papers
Okay.
from last week still due tomorrow?
Yes. I mean, I taught that, Tuesday or Wednesday last week? Monday? I don't know. I mean, I gave you so much time on it. All right, so that one thing is due Tuesday, all right? And then you're actually going to have like 3 worksheets this week, okay? But the next 2 worksheets are like a 1-page worksheet, and I'm going to put them both on 1 page, like front and back, okay? And then this adolescent one I think is front and back, okay? But I have to get caught up a little bit, all right? So y'all need to if y'all would, show me some grace and mercy, all right? And we're going to have basically 3 worksheets. I just said we were going to have 3 worksheets this week. But one of them's going to be front and back. It's just a front and back. Right? So it's like the normal one. So basically it's 2. Does that make sense? It's just 3 sections. Does it make sense? So, all right. Anyway. 6. You have 6. Get it right. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. It's all fine. All right, adolescence. All right. Let's talk about adolescence. This is the part of human development where you are currently at. So you should have great insight into this period of development, correct? Dead silence. Great. No, you have no clue what's going on. You're just here on the ride, right? You don't even know. You're just like, I don't know. Well, whatever happens. I don't know. Okay. So how do we define adolescence, right? I mean, where does this go? What would people normally define adolescence, guys? Teenagers, right? Well, what's that? Some people would say adolescence is state of mind, okay? But period of life, right, from 13 to 20. Past, it was defined as the teen years, 13 to 19. But now they more define it like 13 to 20. It's where we're physical. I can't read my writing, and I don't know why. Where you're physically not a kid, but you're not quite independent enough to self-support yourself, right? I mean, that's what an adolescent is, right? You know you're not a kid. We can tell you're not a kid, even though you're still probably called a kid by some people. I know I call y'all kids a lot of times, right? But you're not quite an adult because you're not out there being able to support yourself wholly. So you're somewhere in between, right? And so anywhere 13 to 20, right? It's not necessarily determined by age. And also, I think it more concerns how a person deals with really their life issues such as work, family, and relationships. Clearly we can define when the onset of adolescence starts, but we have a definite problem on defining when it ends. Okay? Like we can determine when it starts. When adolescence starts, we have a hard time defining when it ends. And looking in human development, you see that over and over again, right? Because we can't just define it as at the end of teens, right? 19, you hit 20, then it's over, right? I think you can clearly see and know people that are into their 20s and go, yeah, that person isn't an adult. They clearly are not one. I had an uncle who was clearly into his 50s. And I would clearly not say he was an adult. All right? Although he was the chief of police in a small town, I would clearly say he was not an adult. All right. And why they hired him, it's beyond me. But anyway, so let's talk about physical development of adolescence. I know it's something that makes y'all feel uncomfortable, and that's fine because it's funny to me. All right, so, huh? So let's talk about physical development. All right, so physical development is part of adolescence. It's part of change. It's part of what we go through. We all do, right? So there's physical changes. So what happens at the onset of adolescence?
What's that for?
It starts with a P. Puberty, right? So this is how we can clearly understand when adolescence starts is puberty. Puberty is the clearest sign of the beginning of adolescence. All right, when we know when it starts, right? And there's physical changes, right? There's physical changes with one, the primary sex characteristics, right? This is growth of actual sex organs for the males and females. And then I thought you had a question. I was like, yes, I will name them if I need to. But you have growth, yes.
You should name them.
Of the penis and the uterus, okay? Sex organs, the growth of the actual sex organs. That's the primary sex characteristics. It's in your book.
Funny.
What? Make it funny?
Yeah, try to make everybody uncomfortable.
No. Oh, I'm sure there's people in here that are totally uncomfortable. All right, and then there's a secondary sex characteristics, which is change in the body development of the breast and of body hair, right? This is the onset of puberty. Right? These occur in the body of sexual development, and it eventually reaches its peak. All right, so puberty is is the clearest sign of the onset of adolescence, guys. And so we can definitely define where it starts. Again, really hard where it ends, to figure out where it ends. So how does puberty occur? Okay, so, and we've gone through really the scientific part of it, of the glands and everything. So we're just going to touch base on that just a little bit and understand that. But puberty occurs simply through a series of complex glandular activities. It's stimulated by the pituitary gland, the master gland. The thyroid gland also increases the rate of growth. The adrenal or sex glands, they change the body hair, the muscle tissue in males, the menstrual cycle in girls. Right? This is where all these glands come together and change the body. All right? Okay? Puberty often begins 2 years after a growth spurt, typically. And typically this happens for girls around the age of 10 and for boys around the age of 12. So there's usually this big growth spurt around that age, and then usually within about 2 years, puberty hits. Okay? So let's move on. Let's talk about the development of the brain. Okay? So puberty happens, and then we can clearly see that the body stops developing, and we have a hard time defining actually when adolescence stops. But other parts of the body develop, and it takes much longer for the development of the body to end. And one of those portions is the brain. All right, so the brain continues to develop into adulthood, especially the prefrontal cortex, right? And I know I've touched on this before, right? But the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for the impulse control, decision-making, organization, understanding of information, and it doesn't fully develop until we're in our late 20s, early 30s, okay? So if that part of our brain, right, isn't fully developed and is responsible for impulse control, decision making, don't you think this would be a reason for us as adolescents, when I was an adolescent, when you are right now, have some sort of problem making certain decisions? Don't you think it would be a problem if that part of your brain that controls the decision-making process isn't fully developed? Yeah, I think so, right? I think it's one of the reasons why, and our book states this, and I think it's definitely one of the reasons that you guys, and and I say you guys, when I say you guys, I'm saying adolescents, people your age, all right, tend to engage in risky behavior, right? And then that's not everybody, but you tend to if my friend jumps off the cliff, I'll do it too, right? Without any regard as to what happens, right? Because, I mean, I remember doing things that I shouldn't have done, even though I knew better, right? Even though I knew my parents told me not to do it, even though I knew people I trusted told me not to do it, but I did it anyway. Well, one of the reasons why we tend to do things we're not supposed to do is because front part of our brain isn't fully developed yet. Is that an excuse to make why we do some of the things we do? For bad choices we make? Oh, well, my brain wasn't fully developed, therefore I'm not responsible. Well, no, you still chose to do it, all right? But, you're still responsible for your decisions, okay? But just so you know, it's harder for us to make decisions sometimes because of the prefrontal cortex not being fully developed, okay? And so be aware of that. So let's talk about cognitive development for a minute. This is less visible than the physical development, but still it's a major change, okay? And when we talk about cognitive development and how we think, it's a big deal about how we think about ourselves, our peers, relationships, and the world around us, right? It's definitely something that's going on in your world right now, right? You're making decisions right now about who you are, how you feel about the world around you, how you feel about your peers, and all that. And sometimes it's a daily twist and whirlpool of mess and drama. Would y'all agree with that statement? Sometimes it is. Okay? Guess what? That's because you're a teenager. All right? Because not only are you going through this, trying to figure out all your thoughts, feelings, and processes, right? But every one of your friends are doing the same thing. Some people are holding it together better than others. All right? Some people have cracks in the foundation, some people don't. But under the surface, some of them are cracking. Okay? Some of them are having just as much pressure as you are. All right? Because you all are going through the same type of process of trying to figure out who you are. Okay? So let's look at Paget's formal operations, okay? And so we've studied this before, but in this final stage of formal operations, in which abstract thinking becomes possible, this is where teens begin to think about hypothetical situations leading to what an ideal world would be like, right? So teens tend to move into this process, this formal operations, where they start to think about things, where they start to think about the what ifs, right? And they start thinking about how things could be. Adolescents y'all are headed into adulthood, and you start to think about things, right? But you start to think more egocentrically. Okay? And this is where you catch yourself. You start thinking about more egocentric. Okay? And adolescents are more occupied with their own thoughts. And they may be convinced that their thoughts are as important to others as they are to themselves. Okay? This is more egocentric thought. Okay? Hear me again. Egocentric thought is where you are more occupied with your own thoughts, and you also may be convinced that your own thoughts are as important to others as they are to yourself. Egocentric thought. Okay? This is where adolescents tend to find themselves. Okay? So there's two ways egocentrism emerges. One is from personal fable, and two from imaginary audience. Personal fable, this is this, okay? This is where adolescents, become convinced that they are special, they're one of a kind, and that no one else has had these thoughts and feelings before them. Here's an example. You just don't understand me, I'm different from you. Have you ever kind of, and I don't want anybody to answer this, okay? Have you ever kind of just had that thought process? You just don't understand me, I'm different from you. Personal fable, again, is where adolescents become convinced that they are special, one of a kind, and that no one else has had these thoughts and feelings before them. The example is an adolescent's thinking, you just don't understand me, I'm different from you. Right? Because in the personal fable, they feel unique and somehow protected from dangers, and they don't have to take any precautions. In this type of thinking, in this egocentric thinking and thought, in the personal fable, this tends to result in things that you don't want, right? In unwanted pregnancies, in severe injury, in death, drinking and driving, texting and driving, drug use. Why? Because there's no dangers from what you do because you think you're special. You think nothing else can harm you. You're different than everybody else. You just don't understand me because that won't happen to me. When in reality, we're all pretty much on the same playing field as far as consequences and things that will happen if we engage in certain activities. Y'all following me? Okay. Let's talk about the second one. Imaginary audience. This one here is convinced, where the adolescence is convinced everyone is looking at them. They are the center of everyone else's world, just as they are the center of their own world. A lot of times, adolescents, and I'm not trying to sound preachy to you guys, okay? I'm really not, all right? Because I've been where you are, all right? And I know how I was, and we think we're the only ones that exist sometimes. I'm not saying that's everybody, because obviously it's not everybody, but we think we're the center of our universe, center of our world, right? Well, this is more than that. Is not only that, but convinced everyone is looking at them. Like, not only are you center of your universe, but you think everybody's looking at you also. And we may have levels of this where we think this and people look at us this way. But this is where we become extremely concerned about what others think about us and what we look like and how we behave. So we behave and act and look like how others perceive us. All right? And that's why we change the way we do. We change because other people look at us that way. It's an imaginary audience. Does that make sense? Because in reality, most of the time, people aren't really looking at us at all. There may be a few, but most people aren't. Okay? All right. Any questions on either one of those? I feel like I touched on a few things that might be sensitive, and if you want to talk about them a little bit, we can. Anything? All right. All right, let's move on to moral development. Okay, what is moral development? What is moral development? What? Morals? What are morals?
The things that make you feel bad.
They don't have to make you feel bad.
Your standard for going through life.
So right and wrong? Okay, the understanding of right and wrong. Moral development within adolescence. So Lawrence Kohlberg, a developmental psychologist, right? He outlined a theory to development of moral thinking. He proposed 3 levels of moral development, okay? And so let's talk about those 3 levels real fast. I'm going to turn my page here if I can find it. I went the wrong way. It's on 337 of your book. But he said this, all right? There is pre-conventional morality. This is for very young children. So it says this. Here's how rules are understood, okay? All right? So pre-conventional morality. This is for very young children. Morality of an action is based on the consequences. Actions that get rewarded are right, and those that earn punishment are wrong. Seems very simplistic, correct? Yes. So here's the example. A child who takes money from a parent's wallet and does not get caught does not see that the action is wrong. Did you catch that? Right? Okay, let's rewind. Let's read it again. All right. Here's the rules. How rules are understood, okay? This is pre-conventional morality, all right? Very young kids. Morality of an action is based on the consequences. Actions that get rewarded are right, and those that earn punishment are wrong. Here's the example of this one. A child who takes money from a parent's wallet and does not get caught does not see the action as wrong. How would the child know the action's wrong? How would the child know? How can we correct that so that the child would know that the action's wrong? Yeah, they would have to get caught, right? Yeah, they'd have to get caught and there'd have to be punishment. Correct? All right. That's how the child would know it's wrong, right? But because the child took the money, right, and never got caught, they don't view it as wrong. It's nothing. Right? Now, while they didn't receive reward for what they did, right, they also didn't receive punishment. So therefore, they didn't receive punishment. Therefore, they view it as not wrong. Y'all following me? Okay? That's the very simplistic level of morality, the very first one, pre-conventional morality. Okay? Let's look at does everybody understand that one? Very simplistic, right? All right, let's look at the next one, all right? And this is on page 337 of your book, okay? Conventional morality. This is usually older children, adolescents, and most adults. All right, here's the rules, how rules are understood, okay? An action is morally right if it conforms to the rules of the society and wrong if it does not, okay? A child scolds a parent for littering because there is a sign saying not to do so. So what do you think about that one? An action is morally right if it conforms to the rules of the society and wrong if it does not. See, I would have a problem with that one. We'll see here in a minute.
Why? Because kids can't be right? Huh?
Kids can be right.
Exactly. Pick up your litter.
A child scolds a parent for littering because there's a sign saying not to do so. All right, that's conventional morality. All right, because you see rules for society in a whole, and you conform to those rules, right? So now there's another level, which is post-conventional morality. All right, and this is where. Anyway, I'll show you here in a minute. Post-conventional morality, about 1/5 of the adult population conform to this one. How rules are understood in this one. Morality is now determined by the experiences and judgment of the person, even if that judgment disagrees with society's rules. So here we go. This is an extreme example. A husband helps his dying wife commit suicide to end her pain, even though society considers that action to be murder. So that's kind of an extreme example, but it's a good example. I would say the example before, a child scolds a parent for littering because there's a sign saying not to do so. A child should not scold their parent, period. That's outside of societal norms. A child should never scold their parent. See what I'm saying? So that's where I disagree. But at least I'm honest with it, about my bias towards it. A husband helps a dying wife commit suicide to end her pain, even though society considers the action to be murder. And we've heard about instances like this. Murder should never happen. All right? Some people take this route to help their loved ones. I am totally against euthanasia, period. Doesn't matter in what form or fashion. I think all life is precious to conception to natural death. I don't think we should take life, period. Okay? That's my viewpoint on it. For any reason. And I think I've been really honest when I tell y'all about my biases, right? Like I just tell you about it. And so when something like this comes up in our book, I'm quick to tell you. But this is an example of post-conventional morality. So when do we defy what society rules are and when we don't? Okay? So let me ask you this. There's an example of a moral dilemma. An ant worked long and hard over the summer to gather food for himself and his family. The grasshopper, who preferred to play and be lazy all summer, laughed at the ant for working so hard. The ant said, "You'll be sorry this winter when you have no food." Sure enough, when winter came, the very sorry grasshopper, cold and hungry, came to the ant and begged for food and shelter. Should the ant give food and shelter to the grasshopper? What do you think? It's a moral dilemma. Guys, what do you think?
Well, it's difficult. I don't want to get.
You have to?
I said, if he dies of not getting food, then yeah, I guess I owe food, but I'll be happy about it.
Wow, so you'll do it grudgingly. Like, here's your stinking food. Here's the yams in the back of my cabinet because I ain't eating those stupid things. Right?
He doesn't have to know about that.
Oh, at church we got to give to the blessing box this month, so let's go get the cans in the back of the cabinet. You know that's true, and I know that's true because I go to church and people do that stuff all the time. Anyway, so it's only, you know why it's funny? You know why it's funny? Because it's true.
It is true.
It is so true. When you go through the canned goods and when they've given it to the church to give to somebody else and you go through it and it's like 2 years old.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And you're like,
Okay, I know what you're
they
saying.
just get like, okay. Anyway, sorry.
Okay, if they're expired 2 years old, maybe not.
Anyway, it's only funny because it's true. All right, moral dilemma, guys. What do? Do we let the grasshopper die?
Yes. I don't know. I think grasshoppers.
Because he should have took care. Hey, the ant warned him and said, "Look, dude, we're working here. You need to work too. Get your crap together. You're gonna die."
Let me speak.
Right? And what happened? Grasshopper didn't take his word for it. Went frolicking around, having fun, right? While the ant worked his butt off. And the ant should have just, right?
Let him die.
Gave him the middle finger and went on, right?
Right. I think they should feed the grasshopper this time, and if it does it again, then maybe think about it twice.
Or wait till the grasshopper dies and then use his body for food.
Oh my God.
Then they'll have more food.
What is wrong with you?
Whoa.
Calm down.
Why not?
Wait, listen to me. I have a good point, and you won't listen.
Post-conventional morality, right? Why not? It's winter. We might need more food. So let's let the dude die, and we'll use his body for more food.
I hate
That is
grasshoppers.
not morally normal. That's
Why not?
Do you do that with people?
So there was a plane crash once.
Oh God.
Soccer team. True story. Plane crashed in the snow. And I'll have to give you all the details of it, but plane crashed. And they were faced with a moral dilemma because they had no more food. People had died. Okay, they took all the bodies, they put it away from the plane. There were several of them, part of the fuselage was left, and they were huddled up in it. Some of them had taken as much food as they could to go get help, but they were stuck there. Okay? And they had to make a moral dilemma. How do we survive? There were bodies 50 feet away. They had to make a decision. Do we starve to death? Or do we cannibalize?
I'm gonna be sick.
Moral dilemma.
How is this related to a grasshopper?
I'm just playing devil's advocate with you guys when it comes to the grasshopper and the ant. My point is that there's the moral levels of morality and moral development, guys, that y'all have to deal with. Right? These are extremes. Complete extremes. All right? All right?
Grasshopper, and then if it
My point is this, right? In psychology, right? In human development, there's levels of morality in which you're going to have to deal with things, and you need to look at them. You need to look at this table on page 337 whenever you get to it, okay? And look through it, okay? And that's what we're discussing it, guys. All right? Do I think we should cannibalize? No. Do I think we should do that? No. I'm just playing devil's advocate with the grasshopper and the ant. What would I do? I would help. I would help the grasshopper. Right? I'd help him. Like, come in. I've got shelter. I've got everything else for you. Look, come in. We'll work together. If we run out of food, then we both run out of food together.
Yeah, I would starve to death before I ate
Yeah.
someone.
Yeah. I mean, that's now in that situation where you're stranded and you're gonna die. I don't know what decision I would make.
I'd rather go eat leaves and throw it all up.
There were none. There were none. This was it. There wasn't any. There wasn't another decision. Okay? Like, and I don't know what I would do in that situation. You know, it's an extreme decision, right? So, and so it's a whole nother level of a morality decision, okay? All right, so let's move that aside for a second. Let me talk about one other thing and we'll be done. So we talk about psychosocial development, right? And we talked about Erickson's theories, and within this, especially in adolescence, you talk about identity versus role confusion. And I think you can really understand this about who you are as a person and the roles in which you're confused about within y'all's age group, right? Because this is a psychosocial crisis that you have to be faced with, guys. The teen must choose from among many options for the values of their life, beliefs, political issues, career options, marriage, right? You're constantly being bombarded with this during adolescence. All these things, okay? There's a consistent sense of self that must be found, right? Like you're trying to find out who you really are. But Erickson believed teens that resolved conflict early on in the stages were better equipped to resist peer pressure and to engage in were better to resist peer pressure, and they wouldn't engage in unhealthy or illegal activities. But he said those teens who were not successful in the early stages, they had a lack of trust in others, feelings of guilt and shame, they had self-esteem issues, and they had dependency on others. But when we talk about all this stuff, we feel peer pressure during this time, right? And peer pressure is effective on teens, and it really is effective on us to fit in. And you know this. I don't have to tell y'all that. Y'all know this. Y'all know that people pressure you to do things all the time, especially at your age. Okay, and what you tend to do is you play the part. You're a model child for your parents. You're a good student for your teachers. You play the cool kid, the delinquent, whatever for your friends, right? But you're confused about your role and your identity and who you are. This is the identity versus role conflict because you don't know. You're trying to figure out who you are, but you have all these other roles and you're confused about them. This is the dilemma. That's Erickson's dilemma, and your dilemma as being an adolescent. And I think it rings true. You're trying to find out who you are, who self is, and you have all these other roles and all these other hats you wear, and all this peer pressure and stuff on you, and you can't quite figure it out because you're hearing all these other voices from everybody else trying to tell you who you are. Okay? So be careful. All right? All right. So then there's the parent-teen conflict, right? We clash with our parents from time to time, or our guardians, right? Conflict is a necessary step in breaking away from childhood, dependence from our parents, and being self-sufficient adults, okay? It's part of it, all right? If a car never gets traction, it can never go anywhere. Conflict is traction of going forward, okay? I'm not saying we should always have conflict. There is good conflict and bad conflict. Good conflict is something that can be resolved and resolved swiftly and in a positive manner. Bad conflict is where it never gets resolved and there's always hatred or resentment, okay? And so we have to watch that. But conflict can be good. And conflict typically is somewhat good, especially when you're moving on to stages in your life, okay? Most conflict with adolescents and parents is conflict over trivial issues. In other words, it's really not going to matter when you get older. It's over your hair, your clothes, music styles, just really, it's not stupid stuff to y'all, but eventually will be stupid stuff. You'll look back and go, why in the crap did we ever get into an argument about that? Because one day when you have kids and you're in those arguments, you'll think back to you and your parents will be like, why? Why was I even arguing about that? And then the really big moral issues that you tend to argue about or fight about, here's one thing that you're going to find out. You and your parents, you think your world's apart on moral issues and problems? Bet you anything you're not. Most researchers find out that parents and teens are actually more in agreement than they are apart in big moral issues. Yeah. And so my dad used to say this, and it came true when I had my own kids, is he'd say he would say to me, the older I get, or the older you get talking to me, the wiser I become. And so I will tell you guys this: the older you get, guys, the smarter, the wiser your parents will become. You may not see it now, but some of the things that they've told you will make sense later on. It may not seem like they make sense now, but it will. Some of the conflicts you've gotten into, they're trivial. Okay? Be forgiving. Hopefully they'll be forgiving of you. Sometimes it takes you to forgive them first. Okay? All right, guys. You have any questions or anything, let me know. Y'all have the worksheet. Get to work on it. We're going to go into adulthood and some of the other processes tomorrow of human development. And then we'll get through chapter 8 and we'll have a test probably late next week. Okay? All right.